Welcome to Prime 9, the countdown show that covers the very best in baseball. Guaranteed to start arguments, not end them. This episode features the 9 best curveballs we've ever seen. Why 9? That's baseball. 9 players, 9 innings. Prime 9. No pitch in baseball is more mind-bending than a classic curveball.
Curve struck him out looking.
A finely tuned 12-6 curve can travel sharply from nose to toes.
Big curveball, strike 3.
It's been called the hammer.
Yeah, that's the hammer, the yellow hammer.
Uncle Charlie.
3 strikeouts and every one of them have been on Big Uncle Charlie.
And a yacker, to name a few.
Oh, yeah.
It's the curve that can cause jelly legs, the condition a batter finds himself in when confronted by a really good one.
Struck him out with a slow curve. A beautiful curve.
Our top 9 curves were both a lot of fun to watch and, of course, quite productive for the pitchers who threw them.
A perfectly placed curveball.
So here they are, the game's best curveballs and the men who threw them, beginning with number 9
Oh, what a curveball that was.
on Prime 9.
This is how I throw my curveball.
The curve got him.
That curveball, we haven't seen anyone put it in play.
Big curveball, strike 3.
My most important pitch is my curveball, which is my strikeout pitch. But sometimes guys will start looking for my curveball, and then I can strike them out on fastballs or changeups.
And the high fastball, Kadire swings and misses.
When it's going good, the reaction that I want from the hitter is just kind of do that just a little bit, kind of like a flinch. And that basically means that they're not going to swing at it.
Beautiful. What a curveball that was. He really tumbled that one.
Barry Zito made his major league debut with Oakland in 2000, and his looping curve caught everyone's attention.
There's a great curveball.
Barry Zito's curveball is unbelievable. It went 12-6 straight down. It was really hard for umpires to call strikes with him. It was so big.
There's a great curveball.
I literally had to tell umpires before the game to not call it too soon because his curveball starts so high that hitters would actually give up on it. Then it would break all the way down to the knee. So, but the biggest straight downer type curveball I've ever seen.
What a breaking ball.
It dropped probably 3 to 4 feet at times. The hitters would give up on it. As soon as it came out of his hand, they would think it was going to be high, but it would end up down around the knees somewhere.
Breaking ball, and that was a beauty.
He'd drop it in there all the time, and I was like, man, why don't you just throw that every pitch? They'll never hit it. And they didn't hit it.
Well, no one has been able to touch the curveball. Once it starts to dive, you're in trouble.
Zito rode that curveball to a Cy Young Award in 2002. And 5 years later, he took a trip across the bay, where Barry found a whole new set of batters to introduce to his bender.
I remember hearing about Barry Zito's curveball, but to be in the batter's box and to see that ball come from behind me and somehow get, in the catcher's mitt for a strike, it was pretty amazing.
Zito drops one in, his 3rd strikeout.
He's pretty much at the top of the list with the breaking ball.
We'll never know if this man would have made our list were it not for a chink in his armor.
Mordecai Three-Finger Brown had a devastating curveball because of his handicap.
He was missing his index finger, his middle finger was bent, and his pinky finger was numb, paralyzed.
Three-Finger Brown turned a disability into an advantage because he did not have an index finger on his right hand, but rather the stump of one through a boyhood farm accident.
It was no accident when Brown had his first of 6 straight 21 seasons in 1906, before leading the Cubs to World Series titles in 07 and 8. And his unique grip played a huge role in his success.
Because of his missing digit, Mordecai held the ball between his middle finger and his ring finger, and when he released the ball, it had an unusual spin, which caused a very unique breaking curveball.
Instead of imparting great pressure with his index finger in throwing the curve, he was imparting pressure with his middle finger, which was longer and stronger. So he had an extraordinary drop on the curve.
part of his ability with that curveball was his ability to kind of manipulate the depth and the break of the curve, depending on where he released the curveball.
However he pitched it, whether sidearm, overhand, it made the ball do an amazing number of different things.
Mordecai's magical curve helped him win 239 games, and his lifetime ERA is still the lowest among 200 game winners in the modern era.
The use of the curveball, the use of the different depths and the breaks of the curveball and that overhand hook curve, and really allowed him to excel and be one of the best pitchers of his generation.
It's also a great sort of triumphant story of the human spirit that he could turn disability into an extra ability.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the game's greatest curveballs. We've made our case for 9 and 8, which brings us to number 7. Dwight Gooden exploded on the New York scene in 1984 as a 19-year-old with a blazing fastball.
With that fastball, 95, 96 miles an hour, he was the best pitcher in the league.
But even Doc's heater took a back seat to another of his pitches, one that was downright nasty.
I think the curveball was the key, even more than the fastball. Just a huge breaking curveball seemed to make the knees buckle.
Oh, what a curveball that was. Gooden's curve was like this. And if he was on, it was impossible to hit.
Curveball gets Mumphrey.
Doc had a breaking ball that'll make you take a seat when you're in Little League to make you buckle your knees.
You don't really know how nasty it is until you get in that box and he starts it back behind your head, that big old 12-6.
That's a good curveball by the doctor.
Not something you want to face every day, that's for sure.
The surgical precision of his pitches earned him the nickname Dr. K, and his 276 strikeouts both led the league and shattered the rookie record.
The record. Dwight Gooden has set a new Major League record for strikeouts by a rookie pitcher.
By his sophomore season, he'd become the league's most dominant pitcher.
Curve struck him out.
And that knee-buckling curve helped him win the Cy Young Award with 100% of the vote.
You tried to sit on this curveball, you were going to be walking back to the bench. I actually think I may have made contact on it one time, but if you call a little flared contact, then that's what I got off of him.
Curveball struck him out.
Gooden went on to win 194 games for 4 different teams in his 16-year career. And quite fittingly, it was his trademark curve that put the final touch on his crowning moment.
Curveball popped up. Should do it. Gooden with his hands in the air. He's done it. Dwight Gooden has just pitched a no-hitter.
I don't know that I saw a curveball ever as good as his. Gooden's was otherworldly. That's why he did what he did. He was a freak of nature.
Tommy Bridges, a right-handed pitcher in the 30s for the Detroit Tigers, was universally regarded as having the best curveball of his generation.
Bridges only weighed 150 pounds. His curveball was regarded as an anatomical impossibility. How could a man that small get that big a drop on his breaking ball?
He had long, slender fingers, and so Bridges was able to impart a lot of pressure and create a lot of rotation on that curveball.
Bridges was a key part of the staff on a powerful Detroit team, and his devastating curve helped the Tigers reach the World Series in 1935, where Tommy played a pivotal role.
Game 6 of the 35 World Series, the Tigers were up 3-2. It was the 9th inning. The Cubs and Tigers were tied at 3, and Bridges was on the mound trying to close it out, facing the Cubs with a man on third, nobody out, the go-ahead run only 90 feet away. Bridges started unleashing those curveballs, one curveball after another, time and time again. Got the first batter to strike out, got the second batter to hit a weak ground ball back to him for the second out, and then retired the third batter with a fly ball to left field. Curveball after curveball after curveball. Out, out, out. Tigers went on to win the game and the series in the bottom of the 9th on Goose Gosselin's RBI single.
And here comes the throw to the plate, here comes the run in, and the ball game is
of the world.
And the Tigers had their World Series championship, and Bridges was certainly one of the heroes of that series.
Tommy pitched 16 seasons for the Tigers and left a most indelible image in the Motor City, thanks to his curve.
Bridges' career wasn't all that long, and his time in the sun seemed brief, but people still talk about that curveball.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the game's greatest curveballs. Barry Zito checked in at 9, followed by Mordecai Three-Finger Brown. Next came the Good Doctor at 7 and Tommy Bridges at 6, which means it's time for number 5. In 1993, just 3 years into his Major League career,
And there's the curveball, strike 3.
Darryl Kyle unleashed a 15-win season with a top-to-bottom curve that froze hitters in their place.
You know, when people talk about a 12-6 curveball, that was a 12-6 curveball. The start thin, start high, and then it would drop fast and hard.
A 1-2 pitch. Swing and a miss, strike 3, a no-hitter for Darryl Kyle.
Darryl Kyle's curveball was on. It was, let's not get 2 strikes on him because he will throw it and I will miss it. And that was the mentality. Do not get 2 strikes against him.
Strikeouts were a common sight. Kyle twice eclipsed 200 in a season, and it often seemed like he toyed with the batters he faced.
Strike 3.
Darryl played for 3 teams in his 12-year career, and he always made sure to pack his curve for the trip.
That curveball was really his go-to pitch, his money pitch. He was really able to set up hitters in so many different ways with his other pitches because he had that great curveball, and that great curveball was really his put-away pitch.
It's a beauty. He came down, dropped down sidearm.
Sometimes your eyes would deceive you because it was so good, and you know, you were really at his mercy at times.
You've seen footage of it. Guys just jump out of there, and the ball sweeps back over the plate for a strike.
Strike 3 called outside corner.
Kyle is sadly remembered for his sudden passing, while still a Cardinal at the age of 33. It's our job to remind baseball fans everywhere that his curveball was one of the best.
That is the big curveball, the great Kyle curveball.
Our 4th best curve belonged to a man who didn't even have one in his repertoire when he reached the pros. But a former Negro League star with whom Jones played set him straight on the curve.
Well, it really started with Satchel Paige because when Jones came up, he could throw hard, but he didn't have anything else in his repertoire. And so Satchel Paige, the master, said to him, "Son, you aren't going anywhere with just you and a fastball."
Well, Sam Jones proved to be a quick learner, developing a knee-locking curve. But the man they called Toothpick Sam was a study in extremes, leading the National League in both strikeouts and walks 3 times, earning a reputation as a bit of a wild man on the mound.
Managers, coaches, they all say that the big windup that I had would take my eyes off the hitter, and sometimes I give a little jerk. So now I'm beginning to work different. I'm going with the no windup delivery.
I batted against Sam all the time, and he had a devastating curveball.
The combination of that curve and his wildness left those who faced Toothpick Sam feeling a bit uneasy.
People really just were kind of afraid to dig in against the guy because he A, threw hard, B, had the big curveball, and C, wasn't afraid to dust guys off the plate.
I just go like this now, just from here, just like that.
Jones fanned more than 1,300 batters in his 12-year career, and his 21 wins in 1959 led the league. But what folks recall the most is his curve.
Sam had a curveball that break, 2 or 3 feet. I mean, you start at your head and end up on the ground.
A series of highs and lows marked Toothpick Sam's career, only fitting since his high-to-low curveball was one of the all-time best. Few balls flew by a batter faster than those thrown by Nolan Ryan. And his blazing heat seemingly gave him a license to cave.
When he pitched, it was more fun. Just something special could happen every time out there.
4,000!
So it almost seemed illegal that the Ryan Express also possessed one of the greatest curves of all time.
Overhand curveball gets him.
You can sit on a fastball all you want, but he had the curveball that he threw into your body and then just buckled you.
My honest opinion of Nolan Ryan's curveball is if you could pick it up in time, he just didn't swing at it, because if you swung at it, it was going to make you look stupid.
Strike three, breaking pitch.
He was feared on the mound quite a bit. If you dug in or took too big of a swing off of him, it was bow tie time, which means he was coming in around the bow tie.
Watch out.
So that made his curveball a lot better because he did know how to throw inside. And anytime you can do that, that curveball will keep you off balance.
No doubt about it.
For me, there was very few pitchers with a curveball that I could hear. Of the seams, you know, just cutting through the air.
It was an incessant buzz that baffled hitters, a mind-bending combo of fastballs
Number 13.
and curve
Oh, he got him.
that produced ridiculous results.
He struck him out swinging. Strikeout number 5,000 is history for Nolan Ryan.
History made off a hellacious curve.
You know, what it boils down to is it looks like a fastball coming out of his hand. Then, of course, it stops in midair and drops down over the plate. So that fear factor comes into play.
Strike three call.
It was pretty devastating.
When Nolan had his curveball working that day, it was done. It was possible no-hitter.
The remarkable Ryan has done it again.
We now return to Prime 9, where in this episode we're featuring the pitchers who possess the game's best curveballs. Not only were these classic curves highly effective, they were also a lot of fun to watch. So now it's time to meet the men who threw the best knee-buckling curveballs we've ever seen. We begin with number 2. We all know Sandy Koufax today as a Hall of Fame pitcher, one of the very best. But that wasn't the path he appeared to be headed on when he first broke into the majors.
Sandy first came in the league, as everybody knows, he was really wild.
Sandy unleashes a wild pitch. Robinson scored.
There was nothing to suggest that he was going to be anything more than a mediocre pitcher.
But Koufax would soon get a grip on his control problem, thanks in part to the hands he was dealt.
He had tremendous hands. He could hide a baseball in his hands.
And as he matured, Sandy used those hands in a fashion where he not only became a feared fastball pitcher, but the owner of a tremendous curve.
All the spin came from his middle finger pressing down.
The greatest combination of power and control that you could imagine. He was not just a hard thrower, he had an outstanding curveball, but he had great control along with it.
Had so much torque on that curveball that by the time it breaks, you can't pick it up. And Mickey Mantle, as great as he was, he couldn't pick it up either. And what you do? You walk back to the dugout with the bat in your hands.
Koufax went on to become a 4-time World Series champion and completely dominated the powerful Yankees in the 1963 Classic.
The smoothness and the efficiency of not a wasted piece of motion in his delivery was like watching a jumbo jet take off.
Following the first game of that series, Yogi Berra said he could see how Koufax won 25 games that year, but he couldn't understand how he lost 5. As for Mantle, he was simply mesmerized by the Koufax curve.
He threw a curveball that broke like a cheap folding chair, and Mantle walked away from the plate muttering, "How in the bleep are you supposed to hit that bleep?"
Well, he was unhittable at that time. Tremendous curveball. He just overmatched hitters probably as well or better than anybody in any era.
Sandy Koufax is not the man behind our #1 curveball, but Bert Blyleven channeled the Dodgers ace to perfect his signature pitch.
I watched and listened to Sandy Koufax pitch for the LA Dodgers. I listened to Vin Scully describe Sandy Koufax's curveball.
Curveball. He got it down and over.
I found what worked was to throw it just like a 4-seam fastball and then tuck my thumb underneath and create the power off of this big knuckle on your thumb on the top of this seam, and I always thought drop. I wanted that ball to go from 12 to 6, tumble.
He got him. Buster was full completely.
Born in the Netherlands, Bert charted a course to the major leagues. Just 1 year after he was drafted, he befuddled big league lineups.
Let's look if he throws him a curveball.
There are Volkswagen curveballs.
And here is that strikeout pitch. It's that patented Bert Blyleven curveball.
There's Cadillac curveballs.
Curveball, swung on Whitley.
And then there's Rolls Royces.
What a curveball.
And Bert had by far the best curveball that I have ever seen.
Breaking ball got him.
Bert's batter-freezing curve helped him amass 3,701 strikeouts, fifth most all time.
What a breaking ball. Pull the string in half.
For more than 2 decades, his nasty number 2 was enemy number 1 for batters, whose senses were both heightened and numbed by it.
Bert had one of those curveballs where when it came by you, you could hear it.
His ball had so much spinning velocity on it that you can actually hear it kind of whirring as it dipped over home plate.
Blyleven finished his 22-year career with 287 wins and 2 World Series titles. And it was his hypnotizing hook that left batters wondering where it went and why they couldn't hit it.
One of my fellow teammates talked about an at-bat he had against Blyleven. He said he threw me a first-pitch curveball. He threw me a second-pitch curveball. He threw me a third curveball. And he threw me a curveball on my way back to the dugout. That's how dominant he was.
There's absolutely no way of hitting this pitch.
Bert Blyleven's curveball took him to some of the most far-reaching places in baseball history. It guided him through almost 5,000 innings, putting 27th on the all-time victory list, allowed him to throw 242 complete games, and earn those 2 World Series rings.
And here is that strikeout pitch. It's that patented Bert Blyleven curveball. Out over the plate, breaks in over the middle, and straight down.
But the one place it didn't get him to for the longest time was the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. For 13 years, Blyleven watched as the voters threw him a curve, denying him induction. But in January of 2011, Bert finally got the call to the Hall. The rightful place for the owner of perhaps the greatest curveball the game has ever seen. Well, that's our Prime 9. What's yours?